Welcome to our Urban Legends podcast. I'm Dr. Gloria McDaniel Hall. I've been a teacher, a principal, and assistant superintendent, all within urban schools in Chicago and around the country. Our Urban Legends podcast is a forum for sharing ideas, strategizing together, and supporting each other as we dismantle the deficit narratives sometimes associated with urban education and discuss where and how amazing work is being done. So welcome to another episode of my podcast, Urban Legends. And I am excited today because I get a chance again to speak to someone who I knew from a prior job, from my prior work. And he actually just told me that it wasn't a bad meeting and that I had been really nice to him. He took care of the marketing at a school where I was becoming a founding principal. So I'm excited to reconnect with Joe DiBenedetto. And we kind of know that in the media, the reason for my podcast is in the media, typically we get all the negative about what's happening, especially in the schools, the urban schools where I typically work. But the goal of this podcast is to highlight the positivity and to highlight the joy and to highlight the progress that's being made. And I didn't even remember that I knew Joe, but when we connected again on LinkedIn and I saw that his whole message is about positivity, I'm like, yes. And the power of storytelling. I'm like, this guy, like, I really need to talk to him. So welcome, Joe. And so before we get started, just describe to us like kind of what you do and your journey in education, and then like why this work is so important to you.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, Gloria. I'm really thrilled to reconnect with you and talk to you about something that has really been a part of my life for a quarter of a century at this point, and that's helping schools tell their story. To be honest, when I first started working with schools back in the late 90s, back on Long Island. Worked with 20 or so school districts on Long Island, and it was, when I first started, I was 26 years old. I didn't have a family, and when I interviewed for the job, and they told me it was doing PR for schools, I was like, why do schools need PR? And it really didn't take. It didn't take long working with schools to figure out exactly why they need it. And it's been a love and a passion of mine ever since. And the reason is that, frankly, education is the silver bullet. I mean, it is the most important issue in our country. And if we are successful from an education perspective, everything rises, from and benefits from that point. And unfortunately, and it's not the media's fault. I mean, because they're going where the stories are and what people are interested in hearing. But there's too much negativity surrounding schools and schools, the folks, superintendents and teachers and administrators, they are focused on what they need to focus on, which is, trying to, educate young minds, and they don't do a solid enough job of sharing all of the incredible things, activities, programs, people, successes, that are taking place day in, day out in every classroom, in schools across the country. So, that's where, I come in, and the folks that I work with is, let them focus, let teachers and educators focus on what matters. But if they're not telling the positive stories, the only thing that folks are hearing and seeing are the issues, the threats against schools, the bullying that happens here and there as kids will be kids, and that doesn't excuse bullying. But I mean, we all grew up and We were all children at one point. We know bullying happens. It doesn't mean it needs to be, a national story, and needs to be the focus of what people are thinking about when it comes to their schools. So, that's my role is to help schools share their stories, the things that are taking place day in, day out that folks typically don't know.
That the idea of storytelling, even though it wasn't one of the questions we said we would talk about, but I've heard and done a little bit of research about what happens in our brains and like how we connect when we hear stories. How do you use the storytelling like methodology? And like, is it just in terms of a written piece, or are you out filming people, or how do you get the stories out there? And then what's one success story that like comes to mind in terms of, man, that story did a really good job
Yeah.
translating exactly what I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And really as I mentioned, things have changed so drastically, since I first started in the late 90s, where there was no social media at that point. And our primary focus or way, the primary ways in which we communicated to our audience was really through the media, and direct mail, basically newsletters. So we were really dependent on the media back in the 90s. But with the advent and popularity in social media and websites and digital platforms, it's both a blessing and a curse. It's beneficial to schools, because they can reach their community directly, with their stories and with their messaging. But conversely, the community can also, reach them directly and influence others, through those channels. So to your question about, how do we do the storytelling, since you had mentioned, before we jumped on that, you're someone who does a lot of writing. And there are people who still value the written word, and that's how they consume information. And then there are others who are more geared or more interested in video. So it's important that schools keep in mind, or have a diversity of tools, and to reach, to maximize the reach of their audience. So it's storytelling through e-newsletters. It's video content. It's small. It's using the media, be it broadcast or print. So I subscribe to one, frequency and consistency. We live in a world, as that's where folks are bombarded with content and messaging, and you read one thing, and 5 minutes later you've forgotten what you've read. So it's important that you have a constant, consistent drumbeat of information across a variety of platforms and channels that are reaching your audience, so you get that stickiness. You get that stickiness where folks, oh yeah, I remember seeing, another great story last week, and they're doing exceptional work, because this is the third or fourth story I've seen, that really does elevate and amplify, what schools are doing.
So if you were to pick a school, a story that you are like really, really proud of from some of the work that you've done, like what's one example of some messages you got out about a school that really kind of changed the narrative about that place?
Yeah, it's there was a school district that we worked with that engaged with us because they were, in Michigan, it's school of choice, as and in many states, across the country, school choice is a big issue, and for this particular school, they were losing a lot of students to two neighboring school districts because of white flight and a misperception of what was really happening within the school district. There was a belief, by a large segment of their population that these other neighboring school districts were providing a higher level of academic programming, to their students. So, we came in, we met with the school, we checked under the hood, and to see what exactly was the reality. And the reality was that the school that we were engaged by, they had far more AP offerings, advanced placement offerings, and an international baccalaureate program. So we worked with them we focused on that area to say, hey, there's no better way to to deflate the the belief that you don't have a high level of academic programming here. So we said, most schools, they celebrate the athletes. They celebrate with pep rallies and homecoming and everything else to celebrate their athletes. Why don't we celebrate those kids who are going above and beyond academically, who are challenging themselves academically by enrolling in advanced placement courses and in the International Baccalaureate program? And we said, let's, just before the AP course, the testing in May, why don't we have some sort of school-wide celebration to honor those kids, show that we appreciate, that the school community appreciates their hard work throughout the year, and really energize them before these important tests. So we came up with the IB for International Baccalaureate, IBAP program. We developed social media content. We pitched it to the local media. The first year, they did a pep rally for these kids. It generated a lot of attention and visibility, and generated some good energy, surrounding these kids. So they built on it, the next year, and incorporated yard signs for these kids. Yard signs where you have, typically you'll see the athlete, football, their number and position. But this was, an AP yard sign or an international baccalaureate. And that was, thrilling to see them embrace it. And as a result of that and some other things that we did tactically throughout the year, this was a school district, again, that had seen attrition and had lost enrollment, students year after year. Well, for the first time after 10 years, they actually saw an increase in enrollment. And the following year, they saw another increase in enrollment. So this was, again, not all because of this, but I'm confident in saying that it played a part in stemming the tide and getting folks to realize that the academic programming was top notch, and there was no need for them to go to a neighboring district.
That's amazing. So if I don't know if Lambert, the company that you're with, do you work with schools all over the country or mostly just in Michigan? And if I were a school, that's the first part of the question. And if I were a school leader in, say, Chicago, and I wanted to start to gather the data to be able to tell my story, some sort of way, like what advice would you give me?
Yeah. Well, Lambert, thanks for the question. Yeah, we work with schools across the country. We have offices in Michigan, but in other parts as well. And I mean, the good thing about working with schools is, yes, there is, if you have someone on site who is there day in, day out, there's certainly some benefit to that. But working with our organization, the benefit is that we've got an incredible amount of experience and history and working with schools. We know what the issues are. We know how to tell the story. And it's not just me, working on, with the districts. We've got a whole team of who have different skill sets, from social media to multimedia to crisis. So it's that's the benefit of working with a Lambert. Is that you have a full team with different skills who can help get you where you need to go. To your second point, with regard to, if you're a school and you're trying to figure out, how to tell your story, again, this goes back to the multiple platforms and the multiple, channels and ways in which to tell your story. Don't limit yourself to that the example I provided was just one way in which we helped that district. It was kind of the culmination of what we did, throughout the year. It was kind of the last part of the school year, but leading up to that point, we had been, telling a variety of stories, because again, there's not one story that's going to appeal to everyone. So you want to make sure that you are, giving folks a full picture of what you're doing. That said, if you want to start somewhere, what is our signature? What is our differentiator? What do people think about our school that maybe is incorrect, and how can we change their perception through storytelling, and start there and kind of build backwards. How do you ramp up to a larger story, or how do you start laying the foundation for dispelling any myths or misperceptions about your school?
Love that. Love that. Okay, so if there could be one message of inspiration that you could share with schools or districts, what would that be? Like,
It's a
we're
good.
feeling kind of down about our
Sure.
progress, or like that the story that's out there about us isn't correct. And I know you gave us some strategies, but like, how do we start to internalize the fact that we do have things that are amazing about our school? Because I think that plays into it a lot of times, is that we start to believe the negative hype about ourselves.
Yeah. As best you can, ignore the haters. I mean, there are going to be people who try and pick you apart, at every turn, and are never happy, and always have, find something to complain about. And, that doesn't mean, if they've got a legitimate concern, that you should ignore them. Certainly, if there's legitimacy to the issues that they have, address those. But there are those people who just want to complain for the sake of complaining, and, want to tear down other people. And, you're never going to change that person's mind. So, my recommendation is, as best you can, don't worry about them. Worry about, the silent majority. The majority of your the majority of the people in your community are either on your side, or they're on the fence because they don't know enough about the school to have a fully formed opinion. So, when thinking about your audience, one, maintain the great relationships as best you can to keep those people in your corner, but really focus your attention on the people who are on the fence because they don't know enough about your district. And that's who you're trying to influence. You're trying to influence, them, because if you've got a bond millage that's coming up, or where you need to go to the community to,
Yes.
To get their support, those are the people you need to influence. You need to influence. That a percentage of your audience is never going to,
Right.
of your community is never going to support you, and there's a percentage of your community that's always going to support you. You got to focus your attention on those folks who are just uncertain. And the way to do that is to pick each other up and celebrate one another. And by communicating, again, what are the differences that are being made as a result of what's taking place, within the school each day. What are those successes? What are those, be it small, be it large, if folks are out there, if the school is out there proactively sharing the positivity, that's going to gain traction because others are going to share it. They're going to share it with each other. They're going to share it with their friends. And so Teacher Appreciation Week is a good example, and it's where we are now. But we should be celebrating teachers as
Every week.
every day,
Yes.
because they are the foundation of a solid school. And as we're seeing, across the country, there is a mass exodus, from this profession, and some of it is certainly salary based, but for the most part, it's a feeling of a lack of appreciation. It's the insertion of voices who have never been through the experience, who think
Right.
they know better, and are trying to control the classroom. And that's not to say the community doesn't have a voice in its schools. It does. But at the end of the day, think about your job. Do you want people who are just off the streets, who don't know what you're dealing with? Do you want them directing you
Or
and
giving you any kind of feedback.
and having control of you went to school for this, you went
Yes.
to, and this goes from the teacher up to the superintendent. I mean, you've gone to school. This is you are a subject matter expert, and we need to have confidence, in our educators, that they are going to help our students grow and academically, socially, emotionally. And I think the inspiration is, let's be compassionate, and let's pick each other up and celebrate each other, where we can. Me as a parent of two daughters, I need to do my job of thanking my teachers and their teachers, and informing my sphere of what things are going on in the school that should be celebrated, that we need to, let's not focus on the negativity. Let's we can identify and address as needed. We know the system isn't perfect. So let's address that where, when and where we can, but let's do it in a way that is uplifting and ultimately is going to benefit all parties, teachers, students, families, the community. I mean, that's how we need to approach, the changes and growing, the education system.
Love it. So for the most part, and you've been in a lot of schools, and that's why I thought of asking you this question, especially, I think you said like 28 years doing this. And so what I see typically is there's a pocket of success here, a pocket of success there, but not typically a system where they got it right. What thoughts do you have about, like, what do you think, what is causing, I don't like calling it the achievement gap, because I think it's more of an education debt. Like, I think it's more like we just haven't done right systemically, so that it ends up looking like positive, 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 and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we got to work on. What do you think is causing the fact that we don't see widespread? We got new standards, we got new ways of evaluating teachers, we got all kinds of new technology, we got all kinds of stuff. Why is there still a gap, a debt? Why is there?
Yeah, that's a couple of things. One, I think it really does come down to teaching. I do think that, again, that is, if we think of the schools as the heart of the community, the heart of our schools, it's our teachers. Everything, if our schools are successful, the community is successful.
Yes.
And if our teachers are successful, if they're inspired and encouraged and engaged, and empowered, ultimately that's going to be the surest way of seeing success in our schools and in our communities, is if we have a strong team of teachers who understand that they are supported, that they have room to grow, that they are empowered, as we talked about briefly before, empowered to use their expertise to help children grow. They don't feel as though they're being criticized. Again, this doesn't mean that there's not room for teachers to grow,
Feedback, right?
and that everything. I mean, we all have room to grow in our profession, and I think teachers would agree to that. It really just comes down to, we are not, as a country, we are not supporting our teachers in a way that is inspiring people to follow that career path. For many, unfortunately, it may just kind of be a last, it may be seen as I don't know what else to do. And, maybe I'll be a teacher, or and it doesn't come down to having summers off, or shorter, because that doesn't happen. I mean, it's if my wife is a paraprofessional in a preschool special ed class, and she said to me, if people would come into our classrooms for just a couple of days, they would understand the challenges that face educators,
Yes.
and the passion that so many bring to the table, and how easy it is to get burnt out just because of having to deal with young, impressionable, energetic minds. There's great value in that, and that's what inspires people to get into the profession. But it's just walk a mile in their shoes, and
Yes.
remember, we were all students at one point. We were there. We remember that what it took to lift us up, and the teachers that had influences in our lives. And that's what we want to see. We want to see those people. We need to see those people at the heads of our classrooms, those folks who are challenging and inspiring, and encouraging young minds, and feeding the curiosity that are young minds. And I think that is really the key to, and I'm not saying anything that is really that mind-blowing here, but
Right. But it makes a lot of sense.
until we have that nut cracked, it's going to be
Hit or
the
miss.
same. It's going to be the same. It's going to be the same challenge year in,
Yes.
year out. And until we figure out how do we address the issue of teaching and inspiring, and getting the greatest of minds to see this as their calling, and feeding that calling, we're going to continue to have, I think, the difficulties that we see at this point.
Thank you. Okay, so for the last question, I always end interviews with a question. And when you and I originally communicated, I thought of Amanda Gorman for some reason. So her quote is, "You don't have to be a poet. You don't have to be a politician or be in the White House to make an impact with your words. We all have this capacity to find solutions for the future." That quote just reminded me of just the positivity that I see in your posts and in the things that you're doing. What does it say to you?
Yeah, and I mentioned it briefly already, but that just the compassion versus confrontation. I don't understand the confrontation against schools,
Mm,
when ultimately we should all be committed to helping our youngest learners rise, and when more people are successful, the more successful we are as a community, as a society, as a country. And remembering again that you were a student at one point. You relied on the encouragement and support of residents and families, and so it our community members, I would encourage them, even if you don't have kids in school, remember, you were a student, you were dependent on the compassion of others to get to the point where you are today. And if you're not as successful as you would have hoped, maybe additional encouragement and support would have made that difference, to you. And don't, the schools are not your opposition. Again, you don't have to agree with everything the schools are doing, but there is a way of communicating and having conversations, and trying to get to a more comfortable place for our kids, where sound choices are being made, but ultimately it's with the kids in our hearts, and understanding that we were once them. How do we, what do we want to do, so that they can have success, and that starts with supporting schools. And I think that's what that speaks to me. It speaks to me that compassion versus confrontation. It's, be compassionate. And if you have an issue, try and find a solution, with your school, with your community,
in a
that is
compassionate way versus in a
exactly.
confrontational way. That's perfect. That is perfect. This has been so amazing, Jill. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for the work that you do telling the stories of schools, because I know that those stories that you all are telling are making a difference, from the stories you just shared with us and just in general, because it's just something that happens when the message is positive versus not. So I really
Thank you for
appreciate you being here with me today.
and I really appreciate the opportunity, and sorry if I sound, preachy here and there. I don't mean to, but this is obviously something that I'm extremely passionate about. And, I have always, I told my parents when I first started working with schools, they didn't have kids in school at the time. We were done, we were graduated. And, I implored them, them to, hey, if there's a bond millage that comes up in your community, you don't have kids in the school anymore, but you need to support it, because ultimately it doesn't only benefit, future generations, it benefits you too.
Yes.
And because again, the stronger the school district is, the stronger your community, and the stronger you as a homeowner are. And I thankfully they took that to heart, and I would encourage others to think along those same ways as well. That just remember, you were a kid once too, and you needed the support of others. So thank you so much, Gloria, for the work that you're doing, and
Thank
giving me an opportunity to chat a little bit about the work that I do.
Thank you so much.